Okay. Just so that everybody's aware, we're going to be talking just a little bit about the that's better. A little bit about the asbestos world that we all live in and how complex it can be, particularly from the point of view of managing works that are going to take place. In the report, the CAR 2012 PIR report that came out from the government, asbestos-related disease continues to be the single greatest cause of occupational death in Great Britain. It estimates it comes up to be about 5,500 deaths per annum are still caused through asbestos exposure. There are a number of things that came up in the report, but I'm just going to summarise a few of the points there, and there's some good news and some bad news in the report. The first issue was to what extent are the regulations pertaining to working with the risk of asbestos exposure, how are they working? The answer is yes, they are working. The government obviously can't claim that the number of deaths that have been presented in reducing the numbers per annum can actually be directed at the regulations themselves, but the evidence does suggest that the measures required by these regulations have been influential in controlling this exposure. The second point was, is government intervention still required? Whilst there are improvements in working conditions, there's still asbestos present in many buildings, and therefore the impact on workers, if they're going to be exposed, would still be significant. So the government will always be keeping this under review until such time as we become asbestos free, which I think, if we're all practical about this, is going to be a long time into the future yet. And other regulations detailed in the report and the way they've been implemented by the HSE the most appropriate approach? The feedback overall from everybody was that they found it very practical to implement, but there were some areas where they wanted some clearer guidance, notably better clarity to distinguish between licensable, non-licensable and notifiable work, a bit more clarity on the duty holders' roles and responsibilities, particularly on conducting a management plan, clarity on how much information should be included in the written plan, and evidenced on the permits to work documents that result on the day, and clarity on why the frequency of medical examinations differ for licensed and notifiable work, as the risk of exposure is effectively the same. So in the overall conclusion, the evidence from the research showed that CAR 2012 had met its objectives and had helped achieve a high level of compliance. There was, in fact, therefore, no need to change the regulations, just to take account of the areas that needed tightening that were mentioned just previously. However, before we start patting ourselves on the back, guess which country's got the highest mortality rates from mesothelioma? It's Great Britain, followed closely by Australia, and these two countries are miles ahead of anybody else. Now, there's a number of reasons for that, but it is estimated that close to 80% of the deaths annually in the UK are contracted by people involved in facilities work. And because of the time it takes for the disease to show itself, it's most likely down to the bad old days where nobody was properly protected from asbestos work. But this is not really a reason for complacency. Things are getting better, but we still have things that we need to do and protect our workforce. So how does e-permits manage this? E-permits now provides all levels of management control for work taking place in areas where asbestos is present. It provides a consistent approach in checking and training the competency of persons undertaking the work, coupled with references to asbestos registers and work plans and the key information on the permits to work, make sure the highest level of compliance are maintained through a controlled process. So e-permits will provide you with control, confidence, and ultimately compliance. So what we're going to look at now is a little bit about how e-permits is structured to manage the issue of asbestos in buildings. Excuse me while I just move the screens around. Okay. Right. We should now be on the e-permits login screen. And I know there are a number of existing customers on the call already, so they will know many of the ins and outs within the system. But please forgive me if I just go into a little bit of background detail for anybody on the call that isn't familiar with e-permits itself. So principally we're looking at the asbestos side. So I'm going to focus on asbestos in general, and if anybody would like to have a little bit more understanding of the broader issues of e-permits, by all means they can contact us directly at a later date, and we can go through some of the basics of the product. But we manage asbestos in a number of ways through the data administration. So firstly, we manage buildings in 4 different levels. So first we look at a site, which would be, for example, the building itself. We then have what we call zones, which are typically things like the floors or the outer fabric of a building or car parks. And within those zones you have locations. They could be plant rooms, catering areas, offices, and then finally you have a level for services, which is your actual services themselves. So as an example, air conditioning will exist in the roof upper level in the roof zone on building 1, and that's basically how the system understands where services are located within an area. So if we look at sites, and I pick our demonstration area, data centers and offices, this now shows us the information about this particular site and all of the general information about that site. For example, the maximum number of people that you allow working in a team, shift works, whether RAMs are required, normal working hours, and so forth. But then we also have the information now about the details on asbestos. So whenever asbestos permit is to be generated, you can put in your own warning information to appear on the permit. So here, for example, we just say asbestos is present on this site. Now we're not talking about a location here, we're talking about the site itself. So you can contact a number, and you can also go follow a link to the asbestos register. The asbestos register itself is uploaded into the system, and it can either be a document that's uploaded or it can be a web address, so therefore it's clickable so that contractors can actually go and review that asbestos register if they know they're coming in to do some work and they're not sure about the locations of asbestos. You can also feed in here the information about the validity of training for individuals that are coming to do the work. So the validity of the AAT, face fit, non-licensed work, notifiable licensed work, non-notifiable licensed work, and licensed work. So all of that information is in your hands. So you can change that yourselves to 12 months, 6 months, or whatever you need it to be. But of course the key thing is when situations change or when regulations change, it needs to be updated as soon as possible. And on the same screen there's other information such as who the insurance companies are, what the insurance liability levels are, how long a site induction is valid for, how long RAMs are valid for, and so forth. So at the site level, this is where we manage things such as some of the standard wording and the validity of the training requirements for the individuals. If we now want to look at in a bit more detail, we want to look at, for example, we want to look at, for example, the locations. So I want to look at locations just on that particular area, and I've made the roof upper level. This area has asbestos in the area, so it's tagged. So this location is tagged as yes, it has asbestos in the location. You can put comments in again that will appear on a permit when work is taking place in this specific location now. So the first one is work in this area requires a permit to work at height. We're in the roof area, so that's a standard requirement that we can put into there anyway. But also we've added a note in here that asbestos is located in the wall insulation. Any incursion or exposure to the cavity behind the walls will risk exposure to asbestos and require an asbestos permit and all control measures. The text is entirely up to you. This is just something that I put into the demonstration system. but allows you to make sure that safeguards can be put in place on the actual documents themselves. So that's identifying which sites have got asbestos and then which locations asbestos can exist in and the warning signs. Now, what about the companies that are going to come in and do work that may be asbestos related? If we pick a company from the list of companies that are allowed to work on this site, here we have a company called Specialist Contractor, and here are the relevant pieces of information about that company. There are things such as insurances, so this is where that insurance information is fed in by the contractor themselves, and liability, and all the insurance certificates can be uploaded into here as well, so they can be viewed at any time. If we're looking at asbestos, this is Specialist Contractor Limited, is an asbestos contractor. It had its license granted on the 2nd of January this year, and the license is valid until the 31st of December next year. We have the license number, and you can upload, for example, the asbestos licenses. This is just a simple demonstration one that we put in here, but it shows you that you can upload the licenses for that individual company so they can be checked on a regular basis. If it's not uploaded, you can make that a mandatory requirement. So the license status is granted, so this company is allowed to work on asbestos related issues. So the company is allowed to. What about individual people? So if we pick an individual person, we can now look at things such as their competencies. This is the basic information about the individual, proving that they're over 18, any contact details, eligibility to work in the United Kingdom, and so forth. But here in the competencies area, we look at a whole range of things. General things such as passport schemes, are they a competent person? And again, you can upload the various documents to support this. Whenever you put in a requirement that says, yes, this person is, you get an indicator telling you that you need to upload the document to the system. We also manage for this particular individual site inductions. So this chap is only inducted on 2 sites, of which only one is actually current, and there again is the site induction certificate. We also manage working at height, high voltage, and the topic of today's conversation, obviously asbestos. So these are the different levels of training, the different training requirements that are required, and the different levels of medical examinations that are required, the dates that they have actually been done, and then you can actually view the document. So you can upload training certificates for individuals, and you have full face testing, you have certificates of training for asbestos awareness, and so forth. So again, all the information can be uploaded into the system and maintained within the system. When we were talking about the company, the site earlier on, we were specifying that asbestos awareness training needed to be renewed every 12 months. So this is the starting date of the training, and in 12 months' time it will be flagged up to you and also to the contractor that training needs refreshing. So they would then need to go into the system and upload for that individual person the latest certificate that meets that training requirement. Okay, so we've looked at now how asbestos is managed at a site level and in particular locations within a building, and we've checked that companies are qualified to do asbestos work and that the individuals have the right training. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a permit process that will require work in an asbestos-based area, and it'll show how the system generates asbestos permits as well as any other associated permits that are required. So I'm now a contractor. I'm working for this company called Specialist Contractor that we saw the information on earlier on, and I'm going to raise a permit request to come in and work on a particular site to do a particular job in a particular location. So first my job is to select the site. So I'm coming to work in this place called Data Centers and Offices, and I'm able to select whom I'm coming to do the work for. It could be for an FM company, a Carillion, a CBRE, a Mighty, or whatever. It could be the individual company itself, who may manage certain areas within their own business that are not released to the FM company. Or sometimes you have tenants within the building as well. And e-permits can manage and control access and authorisations and approvals for all those different areas. So we select the FM company as being the company. Hello?
Hey Richard, just before you move on, I had a question.
Yep.
Does the training period for validity default as 12 months for all training information?
Yes, I believe it does. I believe it does default to 12 months, but you have the capability to go in and change that as you will. Sometimes that's necessary because, as I said earlier on, sometimes sometimes requirements change or regulations change, and training needs to be updated. So you can go in there and put another period, for example, a month or 2 months, to make sure that everyone gets up to speed by the appropriate time. But you can extend that out. You could make it 2 years, you could make it 1 year, 6 months, whatever you require yourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, mate. Okay, so I'm coming in to do a particular job. I can feed in a works number if I need to off of my CAFM system, wherever that may come from. And I'm going to select, first of all, a competent person. So in my company, these people are deemed competent people to do work within the company. So I'm picking a chap called Steve Chandler, and here his contact details will come up, and these will appear on the permit. And the chap I'm going to send along with him to do the work is a chap called Richard. They're going to come in their vehicle, and I'll log that so it can go onto the permit for security purposes. And when are we going to come in to do the work? We're going to come in to do the work on the 25th of April, and I need to leave a particular amount of time, obviously, if I'm doing asbestos related work, because I have to get HSE registration numbers and so forth in place. So I'm putting this out in a couple of weeks' time. It's only going to take 1 day to do the work, and I will finish it at 1400. So that's the team, and this is the time. The next step, what am I going to do? So I'm actually going to come and do some work on the fabric. So I'm going to pick the fabric, and I'm going to be doing work in the roof upper level. So fabric work in the roof upper level, what am I going to do? I'm removing excuse my spelling, and I will have already submitted RAMs. For people that are not familiar with the permits, before you can actually raise permits, you have to obviously submit RAMs to an approved person within the organisation to approve them. So once they've been submitted and approved, they're then available to be selected for any particular permits. So this is for removing fabric in the roof areas, is a RAM that I would have submitted before. So why is the work being done? Work's being done because it's a building services fault. Now the box at the bottom covers special risks, and what you'll notice is that the box for asbestos is already ticked, and it's grey, so I can't take that out. The reason why it's ticked that is because I've selected that I'm going to be working in the roof upper level, and we saw earlier on that the roof upper level is a known area for asbestos. So I'm working in the roof upper level. I'm going to be working at height or working above plant. Terminology and these can change, and I can then move on to the next step. So I've now submitted my requirement. There are a couple of things that have come up here. We notice that there's a green mark here against Richard De Silva. His site induction has expired. So whilst that won't stop the permit being submitted, it will stamp on the permit that the induction has to be done before this person is allowed on site to do the work. So when we come to asbestos, this box will appear now because we've got to have an asbestos permit. Yes, we are going to be disturbing the building. I need now to upload a survey. So a survey will have been done on this, and I'm looking here at a particular document. It could be Word, it could be PDF, whatever, and I upload that. What type of work is going to be carried out? We're going to be doing licensed work. And what type of RPE will be used? We'll be using full face RPE. Now we've got another warning that's come up. It says here the contractor's got a valid asbestos license. That's fine, that's in green. But also we have a notification here that this chap, Richard, does not have any training for that full face requirement. So we've actually got to go and do and change some things. So we're going to go back and we'll have to take Richard out because he hasn't got any training in anything. I'll put another chap in, Frederick. Move to the next step. Everything is exactly as it was filled in before. This was purely done just to prove to you how it catches those issues. Normally, as a contractor, I'd know which of my staff were fully trained and so forth. So now we go back. Yes, we have to fill this in again. Choose the file, asbestos survey, and upload it. What type of work is going to be carried out? Licensed work and full face. I can put in an HSE reference number. When I get that, it can be entered straight away if I have it. If not, it can be entered later on in the process. And now I have everything in the green. So now at the bottom here, I will have the ability to submit my permit requests. Choose file. Somehow I didn't upload it. Okay. So now we've got other warnings in the area. Okay, select an activity. There was some reason why this was not selecting activity, repairing. Apologies for that. Now we have the ability to submit our permit because the permit is now complete and everything is compliant. So I was unable to submit that permit because I'd made an error in the process. The error was identified to me. I was able to go back in. I'd forgot to select an activity that we were doing. So now we have everything all set. I'm able to submit this permit request. Sorry, I've got to go back again. Previous step. Right. Sorry, I made a mistake there. I'm going to have to go through that process again. I do apologise. FM company. Steve Chandler. Frederick. 25. 9. I do apologise about that. Working on the fabric, and we're doing repairing, roof upper level, fabric work. Burn services fault. Okay. License work. Full face. HSE number. And I can put some comments on here. And these will then also appear on the permit. So I can now submit that permit request. I've now got an asbestos permit and a work at height permit for the duration. I can change the time that I'm doing these different things. The access permit allowed me on site all day, so I could change the work at height request, for example, to 10 o'clock until 3. and the asbestos request for up to the same time. And then I can submit my permit requests. So they've now gone, so they're now in my requests awaiting approval. There's my 3 permits that I've submitted: an access permit, work at height permit, and an asbestos permit. Right, so what we'll do now is I'll now log on as an AP. So I'm now at the other end of the process. It's been submitted. I'm going to fill in. I will have got an email telling me that a permit request has been made. So here in my requests awaiting approval bucket, as the contractor, as the FM, here are the 3 permits that have been submitted by Richard De Silva, a specialist contractor. I'm now going to go through the process of viewing those particular permits. So we've got a number of things that have come up on the screen. First of all, as an AP, I want to be sure that the work is going to obviously take place safely, that I understand exactly the work that's going to be done at the same time. But I also need to be aware of any other work that's going on at the same place at the same time. So we manage 3 types of clashes. We manage what are called location clashes, and we can see here that we've actually got someone coming in to inspect the AC heating system on the same day, and I can view those permits by clicking on them, and these are the permits that are pertinent to that particular request. So they've been approved by this chap called Howard, but we notice that from the previous one we have a note in here saying no other activity should take place at the same time in the same location, because we're going to be disturbing asbestos. That therefore we now to be in a position where we need to reject that particular permit request for inspecting the AC. Inspecting the AC stuff. So if I'm back now looking at my access permit, I can look at the work at height permit. Here are a number of safety precautions which can appear on that permit. You can define which ones exist on your own permits. They're all user definable. And again, we can put special requirements to appear on here, and any comments that will come from the requester with regard to this particular permit. You saw on the first one we were looking at the access permit, and here were the requests from the requester. No other type of activity to take place. There may be different requests for the different types of permit depending on what that permit's covering. So it doesn't necessarily move across to all of them. So anything that's generic should go on the access permit. Anything specific to asbestos or specific to working at height should go on those particular permits themselves. So if I'm now reviewing this, I can see who's coming, who is going to be the competent person, who's on the team, what time they're doing the work, what they're doing, why they're doing it. I can view the RAM for this. So even though it's been submitted and approved, I might want to double check. I might want to look at things in a bit more detail. As an approver, I can do this. The relevant warnings are in there. The warning about the asbestos located in the wall insulation, and obviously that asbestos is present on this particular site. If I'm happy with this, I can now go ahead and approve this by putting in my own password, and that's unique to me. So the audit trail now shows that it's Howard Albury, the person here that's actually signed off and approved this permit. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to be able to approve the same permits across here. And finally, we have the key asbestos permit. And here again, we have a number of questions. The safety precautions that you want to appear on the permit, they're here. You can actually have a look at the survey document. So again, you can, as an approver, double check everything within the system before you make any final approval. And again, you have access to the RAMs for that job as well. If I now approve that, what we'll find now is that all of those permits have now been approved and they've gone from my list. So they're now sticking in my approved permits list, where they can now be viewed and then issued. I can view those and I can print all the related permits and I can generate them. What that does, that now generate for me a PDF version of those documents, and they will then be viewable. Go to my approved permits, and we're now in a position where they can be printed. And here are now the copies. Again, this would all be branded to a particular company's requirements. It shows the authorization to access permit and the 2 associated permits with it. It gives all the information that we saw on the screen, what's going to be done and how. It gives you all the warnings about asbestos within the system, who signed it off, who the approved people are, and then the closure process as well. Similarly, we have the work at height permit with all the safety precautions, and finally the asbestos permit itself for licensed work with the notification reference number and all the other relevant information that you saw with safety precautions for asbestos on the sheet as well. And right at the end, you'll have the review of the asbestos register survey. So this again gets reviewed by the contractor and signed off. That proves that they know exactly what's happening where. So now that in the system, those are now ready for issue, but obviously you don't issue these until the date of the work. So they're now sitting in a box, in a bucket here, awaiting issue to the contractors when they arrive. You can see here there's the earlier ones that I should be rejecting. So I would be rejecting those ones as the AP rather than issuing them. But if we now assume that we've reached the date where these are going to be issued, I can go through the process of issuing these 3 permits, and they will now become live work in progress. So I've now got 3 permits, these ones here, that are live work in progress on the day. Obviously, you have the ability to suspend permits. Things can happen on the day that may change the requirements or change the environment. So you have the ability to suspend permits as well within the system. If the job's been completed fully, you then have the ability to go in and you have the ability to close out permits. So once the job has been done, all the relevant inspections have been completed afterwards, and it's all been deemed as safe and complete. You have the ability to fill in a little contractor audit form as you, the AP. So did they turn up? Was the work cancelled? Was the work done safely? Let's say it wasn't done safely. I can put in, for example, a severity rating and what wasn't done safely. Perhaps they were working in the wrong place or they were working outside the scope of the permit. I can put in some further information about this. I could also, for example, take a photograph and attach that. So let's say that they left let the electric cover off. I can take a photograph of that. I can then upload that, and what that does, it starts to then log non-compliances against individual contractors, and you see that in the contractors list. When we looked at the companies, there's a non-compliance area that basically logs any non-compliances you pick up, and you then have a report that you can actually put in front of the contractors when you have your review with them on a 6-monthly or an annual basis. But let's change that back to yes, it was done safely, and I can then either close all the permits in the bundle, or if I have to if different people have to close off different parts because the asbestos permit needs to be checked out before someone else by a different AP, that can be done. But here I can close all the permits in a bundle, and they're all now finalised and gone. So I now have no more open permits in my bundle. Everything there has now gone into the reports side of things, and this is where I can now start to look at historical permits. So I can show me all of the permits that happened in a particular place. I could look at, for example, in the roof upper level, and all asbestos permits. So this will show me historically any work that's been done in that particular area, and I fill in the other parts, so it can be between dates of start dates of permits, finish dates of permits, and so forth. And what gets generated is a list of permits that were active, meeting all these requirements, and they can then be inspected. So you can click on a permit, it'll take you to that permit bundle and the details of it, as you saw earlier on. So that's basically taking you through then the process of how e-permits actually manages asbestos now, with the new updates and the new release that came out a little while back. It's a lot more comprehensive. We believe we've covered up all of the key areas that are required by not just the regulations, but common sense as well. What we're trying to do is make sure that any particular or any possible potential gaps in the process where accidents and mistakes can be made get closed off by permits, by making sure that everything is checked prior to the work taking place. Once the work has started, e-permits obviously doesn't have a role in monitoring the activity of the work itself, so it covers everything and checks compliance all the way up to the point of starting work, and then checks compliance once the work has been done, that it was done properly. But obviously the e-permit system doesn't manage the actual task itself. That's where you still need to have all the appropriate precautions in place, and any supervision that may be required on any work. So I hope that has been of interest to everybody in understanding how e-permits now does manage this. My details are on the screen. Anybody wants to have a bit more information about either the asbestos module or anything else within e-permits, please don't hesitate to drop me an email and we can sort something out. Meantime, unless there are any other questions, we'll finish the session, but please, if anybody has any questions, please forward them now. Okay, it seems not. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, for joining in the session. As I said earlier on, the session has been recorded. So if anybody would like to review this in future, you will be emailed and given the link to the recording. And by all means, pass that on to any of your other colleagues within your business. So thank you very much indeed for your time, and I look forward to speaking to you sometime soon. Thank you.